Yeah, this idea that death is not the end, that's actually a really dangerous perspective, because it can cause people to swing in either way. And what I mean by that is that death is not the end can be something that empowers us to not fear death. Yet at the same time, there's a large amount of human developmental psychology which means that we need to fear death, because if we don't have a certain amount of fear of death, and I mean healthy fear of death, like respect for it, then we're not actually motivated to do anything in our present existence or in our present life. And this, for example, let me give you an example of when it becomes negative. A lot of the alternative religious sects and groups promote the idea that death is not the end, to allow people, the promotion of the idea that death is not the end, it allows people to experiment with things they should perhaps not experiment with, because it would generally be considered unhealthy if death were the end. So, for example, the practice of taking some kinds of drugs which might have a serious negative effect on the person. The principle of the suicide that exists in the most extreme cults, where death is considered a sacrifice for their god or gods or whoever or whatever they believe, which is in fact inherently negative for them and their life experiences. So the idea that that we should be extremely comfortable with death and not fear death has large potential negative consequences for huge parts of society. Not everybody is able to rationally handle that principle and that idea. So we have to be careful when we look at this idea that death is not the end. I mean, I believe from a universal perspective that it can't be the end, because everything is reborn as something else. The elements of human body return to the earth, and whatever people believe is creativity or human spirit or the individual goes somewhere else. But quite where it is and what it is, I'm not sure that we have the ability and capacity to understand. And so we have to be really careful with this idea, because there are a lot of people who use it in the wrong way. They abuse that principle, and it's good to understand when it's being used in a positive way and when it's being used in a negative sense. I think that it's really important to understand that I'm not talking about fear as much as I'm talking about respect. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because
exactly.
Because there is this idea repeated by a lot of people that death is one of the greatest inventions of life, because the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative, the contrasting elements and ideas that I've come to understand much more in the last year, and maybe in the last few months even, to understand the polar nature of everything. That it was a great revelation for me to understand that what we define as good and what we define as bad is completely wrong, because everything exists on a scale of gradient. Yeah, so you can have so much of something and it be good, but then if you have too much of good, it becomes bad. And then there's so much of something can be bad, but what's bad in the present can have positive future outcomes.
Yeah.
So this idea that things are alone good or bad is wrong, to the point that there might not actually exist good or bad. There might just actually exist a progressive level of experience which up to a certain point is good or bad, and then beyond that point changes from one to the other. And this is very important when understanding human interactions and human relationships, because we're told from a young age that you have to be good, or you have to be nice to people. And this idea of good, we're told to be good, but we're not taught that good changes. It's not the same thing done in the same way. It's not always a good thing. And so this is where we get what's called virtue signaling. People who are acting as if they're good, and their actions don't really have a lot of good effects. A lot of charities are examples of this, where the charities don't actually have the positive effects that they want to have. And another example of this is when someone says you have to be nice. I don't believe that it's always the right reaction to things to be nice. I think that sometimes you need to be frustrated, sometimes you need to be annoyed, sometimes you need to be angry, sometimes you need to be compassionate, and there's a certain element of grace which is important in human character. But this idea that it's positive to be nice all the time, and the classic example of this is, you've I don't know, some crazy situation. You find yourself in a cage with a tiger, and there's a high probability the tiger's going to eat you, because the tiger's just wired differently and it sees you as food and a predator. So being nice to the tiger might not have any positive effect for you at all. Maybe the best thing to do is to try to escape, or to run away, or to keep your distance. Maybe being nice is not the right option. And sometimes, and this is the classic thing, is that to be good you have to be bad, right? As parents, we all have those experiences where to do the right thing for our children, we have to do something that our children don't like. So and maybe we can explain it to them, and maybe they just don't have the experience to understand that what they're doing is the wrong thing. And this idea that this idea of self-discovery is great, but self-discovery without guidance is almost, for a lot of people, a path to oblivion, because we all need some kind of mentorship or tutoring in our lives, whether formal or informal. So we all, we can make our own paths, we all live our own lives, but if the path is too much against the grain of things, it can have serious negative consequences for our own personal development. And the world is full of people who thought they had a good idea and tried something, and the world is full of people who had a gun, right, and were, I wonder how, right, so we have to be careful, as I think Einstein said, the universe has limits, but human stupidity is infinite. So perhaps that might be the only infinite thing in the universe, is that we we constantly make mistakes, and mistakes is a great word. Mistake meaning to take the wrong thing. So we and to take is like to receive the message, and we constantly take the wrong message from the events that happen around about us, and it's only over time that we get to reflect and understand. It's interesting that we use the word reflect for when we think about something from the past, because normally we think about the term of reflection as what a mirror does, or what light does off of things, and it's through reflection that we have an opportunity to understand a little bit about who we are.